It's a source of shame for many Canadians, but 2023 makes it officially 30 years since the team in the hockey-crazed Great White North has hoisted the Stanley Cup. The last Canadian team to accomplish the feat were the Montreal Canadiens in 1993. In the 3 decades since, Canadian teams have appeared in the finals 5 times, but none of them have walked away with the top prize. The Cup is starting to look quite at home south of the border. That could all change in a few months, but then again, Canadians have heard that one before. What forces have conspired to deny Canadian fans a Cup parade in their own backyard? Sit back, relax, and take this in. Organizational cup droughts are one thing, but the thought of an entire nation being denied hockey's top prize for almost 3 decades is almost hard to believe, especially when that nation is Canada, a country where hockey is a way of life. Canada is a hotbed of hockey talent. Of the 711 players on season-opening rosters in 2022-23, 294 of them, or 41.4%, were Canadian. And Canadians have unmatched success on the hockey world stage. Canada has won 23 Olympic medals in ice hockey, 14 of them gold. Yet Canada's NHL franchises haven't had much to celebrate in recent years, even with Canadian clubs making up nearly a fourth of the NHL's 32 teams. Never before has the Stanley Cup spent so many consecutive years outside of Canada, a land once rich with hockey dynasties. Canadian teams dominated the NHL from its inception through to the early 90s. Take, for example, the Montreal Canadiens, whose dominance defined the 1950s and 1970s. And don't forget the Toronto Maple Leafs, who left their mark on the 1960s with 4 championships that decade. And, of course, the Edmonton Oilers, who burst onto the scene after an NHL expansion and led the league in the 1980s with the help of a young superstar named Wayne Gretzky. The Oilers cemented their place in hockey's history books with 5 Stanley Cups in a 7-year span. But those halcyon days ground to a halt following the Canadiens' victory over the Los Angeles Kings in the '93 Stanley Cup final that triggered a riot in downtown Montreal. 1993 was also, oddly, the last year baseball's Commissioner's Trophy came to Canada. So what changed? Well, lots of things. We'll start with the salary cap. About a decade after the Canadiens' 1993 victory, the salary cap was instituted in 2005-06, with the hopes of more parity across the league. This was a big blow, in particular for the Maple Leafs. Between the 1998-1999 season and the 2007-08 season, they had the highest payroll in the Northeast Division, enabling them to put together consistently strong teams. But with the salary cap in place, the Leafs, then Canada's best chance at another cup, lost that advantage. But what about the rest of the Canadian teams? The gradual sinking of the dollar through the 90s and into 2002 certainly contributed to their woes. The loonie bottomed out at 61.79 cents to every $1 in January 2002, not reaching par with the US dollar until September 2007, the first time since 1976. Through the fallow years, Canadian teams resorted to asking for government bailouts to stay afloat, leaving them unable to sufficiently compete with their American counterparts, whose contracts were far juicier. This made for many a disappointing free agency in Canadian markets. Meanwhile, not to be underestimated in this discussion is the importance of the NHL's continued expansion into the US. In 1993, the league added its 25th and 26th teams, the Miami-based Florida Panthers and the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. Then, in 1998, they welcomed the Nashville Predators to the fold to make 27 teams. A year later, the NHL bumped that number to 28 with the addition of the Atlanta Thrashers. And in 2000, the Columbus Blue Jackets and Minnesota Wild rounded out the total to 30 teams. In 2016, the NHL announced they were adding the Las Vegas Golden Knights to the fold, and in 2018, the Seattle Kraken were added. In all that time, just one Canadian team entered the chat, the Winnipeg Jets, who had previously departed the city for Phoenix in 1996. Not only did US-based teams suddenly greatly outnumber Canadian ones, but it turns out hockey players really liked the southern markets. Instead of singing "Oh Canada," the common refrain started sounding more like "No Canada." Less of the league's top talent wanted to play up north. A 2015 ESPN poll of hockey agents found Edmonton and Winnipeg were the 2 most frequently cited cities in athlete no-trade clauses. Ottawa and Toronto ranked 4th and 5th. A year later, in 2016, Ontario teams had improved slightly. They weren't mentioned in the list top 5, but Edmonton and Winnipeg still held their ground at the top. Rumors started flying that taxes, cold weather, and a harsh media climate were all to blame, and these things took their toll on the landscape. The NHL is largely a league of lucky bounces, but it isn't so ruled by chance that skill has no bearing. Better teams have a greater chance of winning. With the league's top talent seemingly avoiding Canada, the entire country suffered. But this year could change all of that. Not only did 3 Canadian teams make the playoffs, 2 of them are legitimate cup contenders who finished in the top 6 in the NHL in total points. And those Canadian contenders have some serious talent, a lot of it. 2 of the league's best players, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, have led the Oilers to finish in the league's top 6. And the Maple Leafs have a similar situation with Austin Matthews and John Tavares leading the team to a 4th-place finish. Canada is holding out for a hero, and either the Oilers, Leafs, or Jets could come through in the big moment. Could this be the year Canada breaks its cup drought? It seems like Canadians ask that question almost every year, but maybe this year really is the one.